he's like 30 minutes, right? Okay, this Friday, 30 minutes. It was Wednesday. Reached Burbank, spoke to Julian for like 15 minutes. Why do you want to do this? Why you? And why do you think Warner Brothers need it? And the next week, they sent over a global contract.
Beautiful.
For 250,000, and our bank has 100,000. But we signed it anyway.
In this episode of the Building Series, we talk to serial entrepreneur Jackson Au, founder and CEO of MightyJaxx, a designer toy studio that has scaled into a global business with offices in Singapore, China, Europe, and the US, and collaborating with artists from across the world for its creative and innovative products. So before we dive into the podcast, I just want to take a quick moment to thank our sponsor for this season of the Building Series, OCBC. As Asia's best SME bank, OCBC has been supporting SMEs across the region along their business milestones, getting them ready from day one and keeping their businesses steady with award-winning solutions and helping them realize their growth ambitions. So back to the Building Series. Welcome to the podcast, Jackson.
Well, thanks for having me here.
Yeah. So this is one of the most interesting locations we've ever filmed at, right? So let me just frame the setup for people listening in on audio only. So we're at the MightyJaxx office, surrounded around me is like hundreds of designer toys and collectibles of all sizes, and it makes me just feel like a kid in a candy store. I want to take a few home actually. Okay, so the rise of the designer toy studio business, and I've confirmed it with some of your colleagues as well, is a $13.5 billion US business, and it's growing at 5.5% annually, expected to reach a market of $31 billion US by 2031. And looking around your office, I can see why. So many of the pieces are from the most popular franchises that you can think of, from Marvel to DC, Netflix, Disney, Hasbro, Sesame Street, One Piece, and Sanrio, and many more, right? You're obviously no stranger to building businesses, having launched multiple businesses before finding success with MightyJaxx. So I just can't wait to get into the ups and downs of your entrepreneurship journey in greater detail. So let's start from a chronological order, okay? So you started your first business at 19. Not many people think about working at 19, let alone starting a business. In fact, I don't know where I was at 19, What motivated you to start a business at such a young age?
I think it's the time when, for male Singaporeans, you sort of like gonna get into the army, and you start thinking like, what does your future hold and where are you going? And for me, because I studied interactive media design, so a natural progression would be like Ogilvy or like such and such a type of agency houses.
Okay.
And I look at the kind of work that my seniors are already doing in those places, and I thought, it sounds kind of boring. And how else could I go to work in shorts, most importantly, to be comfortable? And so I figured that running my own shop would probably makes the most sense.
Okay. Yeah. It's very interesting to note that, the inspiration was to wear shorts to work. And again, for those listening on audio, Jackson is doing this interview in shorts as well. So your dream came true.
As always.
Okay, so did you ever feel like, especially at the start of your entrepreneurship journey, then that, you were taken less seriously as a young entrepreneur? I just wonder, like, what are some of the instances that you remember and how do you react to them?
Yeah, so that is true for young entrepreneurs for sure. I remember when I was 20, 21, and I was going to like distributors or stores, and of course they are much more older and later on in their career as well, progression. And I guess the way that they talked to me was that they're not quite sure whether they could believe me because I might not have that experience as they do. I think that disparity became really clear when they started talking in certain terms, like in logistics, we talk about FOB, which is like freight on board. And he's like, FOB. I'm like, what is that? But I'm just like, yeah, okay, yeah, everything is FOB. And then I realized I gotta, I made a, right nod for that.
Okay. Yeah. So how do you like overcome like these challenges then? Did you like find yourself having to do a lot more homework before going in compared to an entrepreneur maybe older than you?
Yeah, for sure. But I would like to say that most things can be studied and understand. Unfortunately, nothing beats the real experience. So I must say that through this process, you definitely knock into a few walls that, in hindsight, it looks, I should have known it before I did that.
Okay.
But that said, I would say when I started business, it was just a matter of buying low and selling high. like that was the basis of everything that I do, which guarantees a profit. So,
Okay. Well, so I've also introduced you as a serial entrepreneur, and from what I can find, especially on LinkedIn nowadays, thanks to them, I realized that you started numerous businesses before, and after each one, you're right back into the grind, just trying to build the next one, before finding success with MightyJaxx. And I feel like failures in entrepreneurship are not discussed enough. So how did you handle like the fear and uncertainty of, starting a new business each time?
well, so each business it's quite different in its needs, right? And I remember one of the biggest failure I had was I had a partnership with on a camera business, and after 1 year, I guess the focus for my partner wasn't quite on the business, and so that led to quite a lot of unfortunate situations. It got a bit nasty.
Okay.
You almost have to have the lawyers in and stuff like that.
Okay.
But I was like 21, right? So when you talk about lawyers and stuff like that, I'm like what's going on? Like
Okay.
we could have solved it, but it is all these setbacks that really helps find
you as a
you,
person,
right, and
right?
sort of tell you like what I should like to do and how I like to operate a business. So it's from the very beginnings of that.
Okay. So each of these businesses actually gave you like new insights, new experiences, right? So in the early days of building MightyJaxx, what were some of these like mistakes you tried to avoid, or lessons that you applied from your past entrepreneurship experiences that you felt helped you with MightyJaxx?
Well, MightyJaxx has no co-founder, so that is a very distinct and aware choice that I made.
Okay.
Which leads to the problems of being a solo founder. So there's no right way or wrong way to do it. I think it's just what best suits the character. And so that was one thing that happened. The other was quite critical, which is never mistake the business for your own personal use, And I think a lot of I guess self-employed, companies or self-employed people might feel like it's like their personal wallet in that sense.
Okay.
And they're not wrong, because at a sole proprietorship level, that's pretty much what it is. But as it goes into private limited, because of whatever reason, right, GST cross $1 million, stuff like that, then it has to be distinctly clear that it's two separate pots, and that everything has its right process and the legal process to run through, especially when it comes down to money. And I think that is one of the most critical lessons that I've learned.
Yeah, actually, interestingly, in a lot of the articles that we write on Dollars and Cents business website as well, we say that no matter how big or small your business is at the start, it's good to just separate your personal finance from your business finance, because like what you say, it helps with like the taxation, the accounting, whether you are drawing money from businesses purposes or, personal purposes, right? It comes down at the end of the day in terms of taxes as well. You have to report it to IRAS.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so I just want to move to all these creative, innovative pieces that we have around us. I see a very common theme in many of the pieces. So what I can only describe as like a character that we know and love, and the other half of the character, we can see the insides, skeleton and all. I'm wondering how you came up with this concept, and why do you think like this design resonated with the buyers and collectors?
Back in 2012, 2013, I met a very good friend of mine, and he came to become a very good friend. His name is Jason Freeney, so he's based in New York.
Okay.
So he's a sculpture artist, and some of his seminal works are about what does your favorite characters look like on the inside, and that intrigues a lot of people, right? Yeah, it just stuck with him as well when he creates, and I saw it. I thought it was the most brilliant thing I ever saw, and I still think that till today, So we continue to invest in that design, and the reason why is because the juxtapose between like a cartoon character and what could be the insides of Garfield.
Yeah,
that is an intriguing thought, and I think that's why our collectors do resonate with it. Like it's often like a conversational point when you have it in the house.
Correct. We only see the outside, but yeah, it's equally interesting to see what they have on the inside.
So
it's interesting that you mentioned the Garfield piece, because I was just like going through some of the pieces with your colleague, and he pointed out that Garfield piece No, but Garfield's actually eating some lasagna. So like the characters are in character inside as well.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so you've kind of achieved international success, I would say, right? With offices in Singapore, China, the UK, the US, and you sell your designer toys and collectibles in over 90 countries from my research. So having started out in Singapore, a very small niche market to begin with, I'm wondering how difficult was it to initially capture a foothold in the global market space?
Well, it was the toughest thing that I ever done yet. When we started out, the industry, it's very mature in Hong Kong and US. Since the early 2000s, you have stuff like designer toys happening. And so we made it a point that the products and any kind of marketing will happen in US.
Okay.
And as a result of that, people thought that we're either from the States or from Japan. That's what they resonate our figures to, in terms of styling. And it's only until much later then people realize that, oh, we're a Singaporean company.
Okay.
But the truth is Singapore does take up about 10% of our overall top line. And I do think it will grow a little bit more, but it's home. And the infrastructure is very well built up, whether is it from the banking side like OCBC or like Enterprise Singapore, which have been great help through accelerators or different programs.
Okay.
So I find that getting the startup and boost in the earlier part of the entrepreneurial journey, it's relatively quite smooth in Singapore.
Okay.
I think the challenge is really like it is almost quite clear for a lot of larger companies, that the market may not necessarily just be in Singapore,
Yeah.
but whether is it China or the Europe side of things, and then how do you sustain that going into that territories? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it always feels like the true scale is only when you can go beyond Singapore, right? As a Singaporean company. What were some of like the major, if you can pinpoint some of the major pivotal, turning points that you believe helped Mighty Jaxx turn into a global designer toys and collectible giant?
Wow. There is so many people to lean on this, which is like your artists, the fantastic team that I have, and they're all long tenure type of people with us. But I think when we talk about certain catalysts that happen, I think one of it all would be the most critical one would be probably in 2015 we wanted to get a Warner Brothers license, so like for DC Comics.
Yeah.
At the time we have like 10 people in a shop house somewhere in Katong, hence this setup like kopitiam type of stuff.
It does look like Katong now that you mention it.
Yeah, a bit of Katong vibes.
Yeah.
And at the point of time they can't give it to us because we neither had the historical support that we could pay them, first of all. Secondly, it's also like we're quite small.
Okay.
And so that deal got nowhere until one day I managed to contact the global head of consumer products in the US. And so he runs globally. So Julian, he sits in Burbank in California. I went to ask him, like, does he have time for me? And he's like, 30 minutes, right? Okay, this Friday, 30 minutes. It was Wednesday. So I took a flight to US for the first time.
Okay, that Wednesday itself, is it?
That Wednesday itself, I just took it that night, right?
Okay.
And it was terrible because, it's economy, so, it's terrible for a long haul like that. But when I reached, drive on the wrong side of the road for the first time as well, and that was terrifying.
Yeah.
Reached Burbank, spoke to Julian for like 15 minutes. And he asked us a couple of key questions like, why do you want to do this? And why you? And why do you think Warner Brothers need this?
Yeah.
Right? And so I pitched what I did. And the next week, they sent over a global contract,
Beautiful.
for 250,000, and our bank has 100,000. But we signed it anyway, right?
Okay.
But it was, I think it were often risks like this that really pushes the company or throws the company into a trajectory that I can't even think it could be possible unless I just do it.
Yeah.
So,
Who knew, right? Like picking up a phone call, talking to someone.
and it actually works.
Yeah, it works.
I think people should, if anything, people should do that more often.
Yeah.
Like even when you ask,
Don't just accept the first
Right.
rejection.
they'll just say no.
Yeah.
And then you ask again next year. And a year after you ask again, and they'll be okay.
Cool. Very nice story there. Okay, so in business, we also tend to hear a lot about the cultural nuances. Like you say, you guys are in like China, you guys are in Europe, you guys are in the US as well, right? It often is portrayed that it's tricky to do business in many different regions because of the cultural nuances. So, for example, how did you find it different breaking into maybe the Chinese market compared to the European market and then compared to the more mature US market?
Wow, that is the billion-dollar question, isn't it?
You've done it though. You're the perfect person
Well,
to ask.
Well, it comes down to people, right? Because culturally, it's all very different. And it comes down to people because I remember for the first few years we tried to get into China, for example. I got too comfortable with Singapore. So I want the team to be in Singapore, everything is controlled within my reach. And that was possibly one of the worst decisions I ever made because we have no idea how the Chinese grew up, what IPs that they would watch every Saturday.
Yeah.
And so that is the same, I guess, less so for US because we generally are Western influence in that way. But down the line is really the mentality that they treat work. Can you imagine, like the first time I went China was like 2012, 2013, and I must be the dumbest person there.
Why?
Right? So the reason why is because everyone younger than me, they're so smart, like whether they are investors or partnerships. You must imagine like they came from all over places in China, and they are like the smartest people from each state, which then goes to Shanghai or Beijing and starts a junior position. And so the hunger that they have starts all the way in their hometown, and the fights that they have to go through, as opposed, of course, the worst thing for us is I guess we get drafted into a not so great school or whatever. That is the worst.
Every school is a good
thing,
school,
right? But everything in general, Singapore, everything is on
Correct.
average median type of approach.
Yeah.
So anywhere you go is generally okay, but for Chinese, the Chinese side of things is not quite so.
Sure.
And so the desire and the hunger is so much more, and I felt like I wasn't being hungry enough, and so I felt I was dumbest guy. And then I realized that you can be the dumbest guy, but you just have to hire like way smarter people. So
that's what I was thinking. Like you did surround yourself with like the smartest people.
but that
there.
was the one thing that I make sure I do, every day.
Okay. So how was that different then to like maybe Europe or let's say the US?
Well, with Europe and US, I would say that the speed itself, it's perhaps not quite as aggressive in the way that the Chinese did it, and I think you can see that in a lot of tech products as well. But also, what perhaps the Chinese might be lacking of is in terms of the pop culture side of things. Of course, this is at a point of time where it's like 2010, 2012, right? So pop culture type of things, they might not be exposed that much. So then that makes up to be very different audience that we have. One, on the Chinese side, we do have to educate. And on the Western side, they are educated, but there's saturated markets. So then how does our products would then be different, or what is the USP of that?
Okay. So as Mighty Jaxx grew from like a small startup to employing over 120 people today across your offices, how has your leadership style evolved? I'm just wondering now, how connected are you still to the creative process, which is your initial passion while you started the business versus taking on more management functions?
Oh yeah, that was really tough. When I started the business and we seemed to be doing well, I think we're doing like $250,000 a year or something, and it was comfortable. I could buy Arnold's at fried chicken. I could knock off at 3 p.m. and just watch a movie, and that's for the whole team, right? So I thought, if I have 100 people, then maybe I don't have to work. Okay, absolutely not true, because
you have to work even harder.
I work way more now, and I think the key difference between then and now was that I think my empathy increased. I used to give like hairdryer sessions, with people that I find to be lacking in some form or couldn't do it to the way that I imagined it to be. And it was a knee-jerk effect. But as I mellowed out in years, then that became a more about how can we design process so that the junior guys could then learn to approach problem solving in a better manner.
Yeah.
Right. And so that thought actually evolved from just I need it to be better, as opposed to how can I make you better.
Correct.
And so it's more of a people approach.
I guess it's also evolution from like a very startup-ish, fast-paced culture to like becoming more process-driven in a way, right?
Yeah.
I'm just wondering then that what were some of the hardest parts of the process, especially the creative process, that you had to let go?
Yeah, so I let go of the creative process, I think, for a period of 2 years because we were, as you know, we are venture backed. So we had to do a lot of time, spend a lot of time like raising funds and talking to investors. So that took like probably 1.5 years, 2 years off my creative schedule. And then that's when I realized that, I could actually help my colleagues by making quicker decisions for them so that we don't have to undergo like certain slumps in product design, which actually happened for us in 2017, 2018 type of timeline. And so when I get back in, and I still lead the creative team right now, it's just that I have more leaders on board with me. And admittedly, they're also younger than me, so they definitely know much more of the trend that's happening.
Yeah, I mean, it's good and bad, right? You get some of that young influence.
And so I guess I contribute much less to it right now than I did like in the beginning. But I love that because I want to empower the next generation of leadership, ultimately because I can do less work. So our
I'm sure
objective is
that's not the
aligned.
case. Okay, I mean, you did mention that you're venture back, so I did some of this, a little bit of research, so I found that you recently raised $11 million in an extended Series A round. This is back in May 2024. And in total, you've raised over $51 million to date, right? So when you raise external funding to grow a business, you likely have to manage, like what you say, you manage like investor expectations as well. So how do you balance your personal long-term vision and passion for your products versus, having to make some shorter-term financial performances?
Yeah, so those horror stories you heard a ton of, right? And of course, among my peers as well, we circulate those stories quite a fair bit. But I would say that my cap table is something that I'm very proud of that our team has put together. We did not take neither the highest offer, nor did we take the most branded names out there. But this is a cap table that I love. And they love me as well, as they said last week at my board meeting. So how we manage that, it's really, even before the idea of writing a check happens, what is it that they're looking at? How long, some critical stuff, how long is their fund life, right? If you're 7 years, 8 years, 8+2, whatever it is, then that actually helps us align to our own vision. Because we do need that amount of time to execute to a level that you also wish for it to happen, right? And so that's all fine and good in good times because everyone is aligned on that. Now, when it comes down to perhaps the last 2 years or last year, right, when things happen in a macro situation, you can't control any of it, logistics get delayed, that's when I think your cap table will come in and like talk to you in a way that that shows their true intention. And I'm very proud to say that all of them are still extremely aligned to what we do. And they have backed that up by writing checks as well.
Okay.
And so we got quite lucky with that. Yeah.
Nice, very nice. I mean, it's always nice to know that you have that support, especially when you hit your hardest time. And I think that supply chain problem happened. Probably you were talking about COVID, right? When it happened.
Well, COVID did actually very well, but after which, because a majority of our focus was on China, and so they went through a lockdown phase. So that's why we have to open the Europe office and US office, which thankfully it worked. But I think more so it's this generation of entrepreneurs, and I think anyone from 2010, 2012 onwards, last year or last 2 years was possibly the first true down cycle that anyone went through. Right. So then that's where your cap table comes in because they probably have like 4 or 5 under their belt. So they will give like very, very good advice that keeps your spirit up as well.
Another thing I noticed when I was walking around your office is that, I realized not just you, but everyone else was in shorts or clothes that they were comfortable in. So I'm just wondering as well, like, how do you cultivate a culture where everyone's relaxed, individualistic, creative, and then amalgate it with, ensuring the team is also innovative, driven, efficient?
I think that comes from the founder's mentality and the extension of themselves. Because I came from the creative background, so I know what the environment should be to get the best out from my work when I was starting, right? And so with the attitude, as you pass down to 2-3 people, then naturally they become evangelists for that.
Your vision.
Right? Like how that's going to be. And so that carries on, and the culture is shaped by the people. Because you can't really force them to suddenly not wear shorts or everyone wear shorts type of thing, right? It has to be groomed and cultivated over years. So I'm also very proud that this is the vision and image that we are presented with today, because I've always told them in interviews that if we're gonna spend like most of our lives working, then it better be somewhere and some place that you feel comfortable in. Now that's whether in suits or in shorts, right?
Yeah.
And that is something that the leadership always passed off.
And I guess like we've already mentioned, right, MightyJaxx grown, taken funding as well. So the common saying is that the bigger your business, the bigger the problems you usually have to solve. So what's been some of the toughest decision you had to make as a leader or business owner as your business scaled up as well?
Because our growth over the last couple of years have been quite quick, that compounds with the physical act of moving offices and setting in CRM systems, stuff like that a growing company would need. I think the adaptation of process, it's a very, very challenging one. And when we went from 20 people to 40 people, 50 people, right? I think the next benchmark is 80, right? So from probably like 30 to 80, that gap, we see 80% of the 30 people leaving the company.
Okay, wow. So
and that
like
was
the
very
30
tough.
people who were there, they left.
Because, when you join a company that's so close-knitted like that, it's hard to just change it, and then, now we're corporatized and we want to be more efficient as a company. We have larger stakeholders now, so stuff like that. So it's very hard for someone to accept that, this is still something that they want to do. Maybe they function better in a small setup, and that's, everyone's happy in that sense. So seeing those people go and letting people like that go because skill efficiency becomes a problem. I think this is something that I'll forever regret, going into business and having to see that. And so that's one of it. But as it goes down to maybe like 100, 120, I think it's very important to understand, who are the ones that are actually aligned with you on that, and how can you give value to your colleagues and that they could give value to you. So, it's a change in that mindset.
Okay. And another one of the topics that I kind of want to discuss in the podcast is that, we tend to overlook personal relationships when we talk about business, So I'm just wondering that who are some of the people, right, that have the biggest impact on your entrepreneurship journey so far?
Whoa, there's so many of them. I would say the earlier friends who are business owners in agencies, like they supported the idea of what I was doing, creating the figures.
Right.
They followed, the releases that we have for a very long time. And it's just like grassroots. It's not like this is the best product ever or anything. It's just like the grassroots level of supporting a business. And that actually brought us to where we're at. So for the earlier, circle of people that we have in the toy community, forever in debt to them for providing, insights like that, designs and so on. And then later part, as the company grow and it goes us through like what I like to call a contraction and expansion time. Every 2 years this happens, and it's extremely painful. It's like, shedding your skin and stuff like that.
To go backwards, to go forward.
You have to. It's like tiles, expand and contract. And during those times, business leaders that one day I hope to be like people like, like Charles from Charles and Kid, right? How did he, bought back and owned the entire company again, and how it became $1 billion revenue, things like that. So very insightful, because they often don't talk much and in detail, but just certain words and lines are very, very helpful to guide you along. Of course, this Enterprise Singapore side of things, so ex-chairman like Peter Ong, it's a very close advisor that I will reach out to, beyond just work but also personal life. You can imagine, like I think from entrepreneurs, like your work life, it's there's no balance lah. At best, there's a faint line in between, right? And when that happens, how do you make sure that the family values, the time is there, while that you can strive for your career as well. And so Peter was very helpful in understanding that mindset too.
Okay. I mean, it sounds like you surrounded yourself with like great people, both like employee level and even at a higher end where you need to go to them for advice. People who can give you those things. I'm just wondering maybe you can share one, the best, or a few of, the personal advice that you got from these people that, changed your perspective on what success meant?
I remember talking to Peter, right? We were on a US trip and I was just beside him in the bus. And one of the things that I asked him was that, you're at a very high level of where you're at, right, in your career. And you did that believing in the good of people, believing in, doing good, right? Because these are all related to things that he has shared with me.
Okay.
I find that conflicting because I think in business there are just hard decisions and harder decisions. So, I mean, you can't look great all the time, and I find that very hard that to not keep a personal desire in it. Like you have to fight very hard to keep that aside. And so that's when he said, like, when the truth is when you do good and you create value for people and you think about how you can leave everyone around you, then everything else that you have garnered, whether it's success or money or anything like that, will then be a byproduct of that action.
Yeah.
And so that really shifts the whole mentality of, are we a commercial entity? Are we about delivering joy to people around the world? So that was the one that clicked.
Nice. Thanks for sharing. I think, it's a quote maybe that I will use in the future then, right? Okay, so Jackson, it's been really great having you on the show. You've given us like some incredible insights into bouncing back from your failures, and as well as, building a business out of your passion and managing the creativity and global expansion that comes with it. So thank you for being so candid with some of the tough lessons that you learned as well as the lessons that you learned from your early ventures and, scaling up the business. Hopefully, this can help aspiring entrepreneurs, avoid some of these mistakes and even shorten their learning curve. So before we end, I always try to squeeze in one last piece of insight from the incredible entrepreneurs I get to speak to. So if I were to ask you, what's the one piece of advice you would give an aspiring entrepreneur who wants to start a business out of their passion today?
Don't think, just start it. Stop thinking, just do it, start it. And if you don't know where you're going, just let the wrongs point you to the right way.
Okay, so I can't think of a better place to end. Thank you for your candid sharing once again. You've shown us, the importance of, resilience, adapting to the evolving business landscape, as well as, always having confidence to bet on yourself, right? I can't wait to see what MightyJaxx does next.
Thank you. So
finally, I also want to thank our sponsor for this season, the building series, OCBC. All right, thanks, Jackson.
Thank you so much.